right, everybody. We go on now, and Niklas Nihlen from Helsingborg, Sweden, who is deeply, deeply into astrology of all the unusual and usual kinds, a real investigator into new methods, will speak on an undisclosed subject. And what's it called? I think it's the wonders of esoteric astrology, which rather leaves you wide open. You know, you can say whatever. So I look forward to whatever the subject may be. Niklas, okay.
Anyone hearing me? Am I? Yes, yes. Good, good, good. I don't have to scream. That's nice. So behind this general title of The Wonders of Esoteric Astrology hides the astrology of the egoic lotus. For us today, it's a huge subject, and it cannot really be fully treated in 45 minutes, of course. But I thought that it would be appropriate for us, having in mind the true function and position of the egoic lotus in our own lives. It does very much connect with the theme of the conference and of the pre-conference as well. So, what is the egoic lotus? It sounds nice, anyway. There are many ways to try to attempt to describe what it is, of course. I will maybe give a few here. And this is from the book, Treatise on Cosmic Fire, page 538. It talks about the causal body, and the causal body as the monadic heart center. Now that's really something to meditate upon. It says that in studying the egoic body, it should be remembered that the causal body is the correspondence in the monadic manifestation to the heart center. So just like we think that we in our constitution have a heart center, so the monad realizes its heart center as being the causal body or the egoic lotus. It is a flaming wheel of fire within the monadic auric egg, which embraces the 5 planes of monadic manifestation. It is also seen as the 12-petaled lotus. So we are here equating the causal body with a 12-petaled lotus, just like we find etherically that our own heart center has 12 petals to it, and that also the heart within the head that Michael mentioned earlier today also have these 12 petals. So there's a structure based upon the number 12 here, which is very important. And that number we will, of course, find resonance in other structures, very astrological structures. So it is to be seen as the monadic heart center. Quite an interesting and intriguing statement, I would say. What about the forming of this causal body or egoic lotus? Well, it is formed by the contact of the two fires of spirit and matter. That's the great duality that we're ever confronted with, and the coming together of those two make this causal body or egoic lotus a reality. And when does this happen? Well, it says that it is produced. Produced, interesting choice of words, I think. It's produced at individualization. What is individualization? Well, that is supposed to be the time when we took the step into the fourth or human kingdom. When we went out from being animals, out of the animal kingdom, individualized, built our self-consciousness, and thus entered the fourth kingdom of humanity. So at that stage, we have the production of the causal body established. Now that's a long time ago, right? According to the Tibetan, that's some 20-odd million years ago for many of us who may have individualized here on the earth chain. Some may have individualized on the moon chain, and hence may have somehow carried over a structure of some sort or vibrational patterns of some sort as they began to reincarnate in this chain, in the earth scheme. So it's an ancient structure, it's an ancient body, and it really carries in itself all the possibilities for manifestation, in the sense that in itself it carries the lower permanent atoms that are the focal points for building the three lower vehicles of the physical etheric body, of the astral body, and of the lower mind. It holds the seeds for the building of those vehicles that we, each time we reincarnate, create anew and appropriate anew each and every time. So somehow the causal body is involved in an extension of these seeds from out of itself into the ground, into the earth, so that the vehicles may be created. So where is the egoic lotus found? Well, here is a bit diffuse picture, but it gives you a general overview of what we would call the 7 subplanes of the cosmic physical plane. So this is the cosmic physical plane with its 7 subplanes, each of which plane has its own 7 minor subplanes. Now up here we have the monadic plane, and the egoic lotus was called the monadic heart center, and it is part of the lower 5 planes of monadic manifestation, and those 5 planes would include the atmic plane, the intuitional or Buddhic plane, the mental plane, the emotional astral plane, and the physical etheric plane. Those are the 5 planes of monadic manifestation, itself being found on the 6th plane, the monadic plane, at least having some sort of concrete presence on that plane, maybe essentially originating on the higher planes, what we call the divine plane, or the plane of Adi, or of the logos, the logoic plane. So below the monad we have the spiritual triad, which is the true soul, which in itself is composed of 3 permanent atoms: the atomic permanent atom, the Buddhic permanent atom, and the monastic permanent atom. Eventually, these permanent atoms will kind of absorb the atoms of the lower vehicles that we mentioned were as seeds within the causal body. There comes a time when we no longer have to reincarnate, and the lower seeds are somehow abstracted into these higher seeds. The lower triangle is abstracted into the higher triangle. But till that day, we have a structure here found on the mental plane, the 5th plane, counting from above downwards. On the mental plane, and in the early days at least, found on the 3rd subplane of the mental plane. There is found the causal body, or the egoic lotus. And there is also, therefore, somehow carried the vibrations of the lower atoms as they are extended to build the different vehicles for each and every incarnation. So here we have the egoic lotus, and it in itself is part of what we usually call the rainbow bridge, the antakarana, the pathway between the higher and lower triads, and it has to make a bridging between itself and the monastic permanent atom here. That's the higher bridging that we need to do, and the physical correspondence to that would be, you know, if you take the centers of the spine and then from the spine into the skull via the alta major center, the bridging from those lower 5 centers into the skull and into the alta major, that bridging is a correspondence within our physical frame of this bridging on the inner planes that we have to create. Now let's see if I have a better picture here. I think this is more clear. Now this is only a picture of the mental plane, the 5th plane counting from above in the previous picture. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. These are the 7 subplanes of the mental plane that you just saw. In this case, you can see that the egoic lotus is perhaps anchored more fully on the 2nd subplane. And the Tibetan tells us that early in the day, it is more so focused on the 3rd subplane. But as we begin to respond to the 2nd aspect, to the soul aspect, to the Christ impulse, this begins to, should we say, hover or resonate or find a frequency which is more resonant with the 2nd subplane rather than with the 3rd subplane. So it's us going from the 3rd aspect, the material aspect, into the 2nd aspect of the consciousness aspect. And that is then reflected in a movement also of this structure on the inner planes. In this picture you also see somewhat of the nature of, should we say, its 12-fold nature. You can see the different petals here. There are actually, well, let's count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 outer petals like this, and then 3 inner petals. So 9 plus 3 makes the 12. Now that is the number that we're dealing with here. Then there is a central point, which is a synthesizing point for everything, for the whole structure, which is known as the jewel in the lotus, which is really the monadic presence within the egoic lotus, you might say. I think I have yet another picture of that. Yeah, there we go. We're getting closer and closer to it. Can you feel that? Huh? Yes, we're getting there. Yes, exactly. So, the 12-fold structure. And as you can perhaps now read certain things on these petals, they can be seen to be divided into one outer tier of petals, which is numbered here 1, 2, and 3. And they are the knowledge petals, the outer tier of knowledge petals. And they basically resonate with the third ray and the third aspect and form. And then we have another tier of petals numbered 4, 5, and 6. They are the love petals. And they would resonate with the soul on a higher plane and the consciousness aspect. But if you want to stay within the personality field, they would resonate more with the astral body. And then if you look at these 3 inner petals, they're known as the sacrifice petals or the will petals. And they, of course, resonate more with the spiritual aspect within ourselves, the monadic aspect in itself. And within the field of the personality, that would be analogous to the lower mind. These 3 tiers of petals have one central or inner petal, which is a synthesizing petal for the whole outer tier of petals. So, for example, the outer tier of knowledge petals have one synthesizing petal at the very center of the lotus, which is activated when the outer 3 petals are all developed and somehow synchronously working together. When the love petals are in the same state, then the love synthesizing petal is thusly also activated. And then when the sacrifice petals are activated or awakened, then the third synthesizing petal is also thus activated. When all of those 3 petals are then, all 3 tiers are activated, functioning, coordinated, all 3 synthesizing petals then are opening or opened, revealing the jewel in the lotus. That's the time when we are truly coming into monadic destiny, should we say that. So this is a bit of occultism, esotericism from the teachings. What is of interest here for us today, perhaps, is that we are studying astrology. And we want to know if there's any way in which we can approach this development using our particular tool of astrology. I mean, is there any way in which we can use astrology to know anything more about this development within ourselves? Perhaps. At least we would use the law of analogy or correspondence. And knowing that there's a 12-fold structure here, we would then go to astrology and see, is there in astrology likewise a 12-fold structure? So is there? Indeed, there is. The 12 petals of the egoic lotus correspond to the 12 signs of the zodiac. So there's a correspondence there, or at least an analogy. So that's the anchoring point for us as astrologers, knowing that. Another key point in this approach would be that the spiritual developments of man are reflected in the petal development of the egoic lotus. So as we grow in Christ, if we put it that way, so the egoic lotus with its petals will be also expanding or developing or unfolding its beauty and potential. And that's interesting because the whole idea of spiritual development is built into that aspect of astrology which we call esoteric astrology. There we realize that there is development of man over the ages. The third key point here is the planets indicate the different phases of petal development for any one lifetime. So in studying the planets and their relation to the horoscope and its signs could give us a hint as to what the different petals are to be focused on, to be developed, to be unfolded in any one lifetime. I will try to get there and give a few examples. So we'll come back to that. But these are the key points that we will carry into the astrology, right? So here we have the structure of the zodiac, the 12 signs of the zodiac. Now, it should be stated that the zodiac is a 12-fold structure. The egoic lotus is a 12-fold structure. But even if they are 12-fold structures, how do you put them together in the right kind of way? What kind of analogy are you using, and how do you find the different correspondences? There are different ways to do that. The one that I found most rewarding in this approach, in this study, is the simple approach of relating the first sign of the zodiac, Aries, the ram, with the first petal of the first tier within the egoic lotus. So the first petal within the first tier of the egoic lotus is part of the knowledge tier of petals, and its subsidiary coloring is also knowledge. So it's a knowledge sub-knowledge tier petal. Hence, perhaps you can see that this indicates what tier we're dealing with. The color green will relate to the third ray, to the third aspect, and to knowledge. So this sign is connected to the knowledge tier and its subsidiary petal, which is also of the color green, and hence knowledge sub-knowledge. The second sign is also, as you can see, part of the knowledge tier of petals. But its subsidiary emphasis and coloring is blue here, referring to the second ray and to the second aspect, the love aspect. And then the third sign, Gemini, the twins, is also part of the same tier, the knowledge tier of petals, but its subsidiary coloring is red. And hence, there's a connection there with the will petals, sacrifice petals. So, this is the first quadrant of the horoscope. The second quadrant of the horoscope would then connect with the second tier of petals, the love petals. The fourth petal, or the fourth sign, Cancer, will connect with the love tier in its subsidiary knowledge emphasis. Leo is the pure love petal in this case. It's the love tier and the love petal. And then Virgo is connected to the will or sacrifice petal within the love tier of petals. That's the second quadrant of the horoscope. Coming into the third quadrant, we're dealing with the third tier of petals. They are the will sacrifice tier of petals. The first one again, green, thus knowledge, connected to Libra. Scorpio, connecting to the will sacrifice petal with the subsidiary coloring of love. And Sagittarius in this case is very reddish. So it's will sacrifice, tier and petal. So these are the three quadrants and the three tiers of petals. And then as these are opened, so also the three synthesizing petals veiling the jewel in the lotus are being opened one after the other. So once the outer tier of knowledge petals are fully awakened, then there will be a resonant awakening in the 10th petal, which is connected to the 10th sign of Capricorn. There is, of course, also a connection to the 4th petal and to the 7th petal, because they both of them have the subsidiary coloring of knowledge, or green in this case. So they are involved also in the process. And then as this tier of petals is unfolded and harmoniously working, then the 11th petal relating to Aquarius is also opening up. And then the last quadrant being awakened, we'll also find a resonant awakening within the last or 12th petal, resonant with the last sign of the zodiac, which is Pisces. The, what does he say? The utter sacrifice of all forever, that's connected with the 9th petal, which is, when you've gone through the sacrifice of all petals, the utter sacrifice of all forever is then also relating, of course, to the Pisces synthesis petal, which is the ending of the whole process of incarnation in a way. The completion. The completion in becoming a savior, a Christ. You fully embody the Christ energy at that time, and in a way you no longer need the egoic lotus. It is becoming a limitation upon you, and that will be the time when the causal body is destroyed, and you could say the contents, the beauty which is found there, are rarefied and absorbed into the egoic, into the spiritual triad, which is, as we stated before, the true soul, the true soul. So any questions on the structure here that is suggested? Yes, Kathy?
awakening that synthesis petal at that stage?
He does tell us that there is a resonant awakening taking place in the synthesizing petals once the outer tier of petals is organized and awakened and harmoniously working in synchronicity, if we put it in that way.
It must be very faint at that early stage, wouldn't it be? Very faint.
Faint, yes. What do we have to compare with? It's all relative, yes. It increases, of course, as we go. As you add this petal and as you add this petal, then of course this will be even more so enhanced, right? But there are different, should we say, there are different phases of development, and I'll talk about that in a little while here. So. Maybe that will shine a little light on that issue. Yes?
Of course, would have been opening way back in the history of this individual's causal body development. But at the point at which there is some stimulation of the synthesis petals, they're very far along the path, and that development, which has been continuing apace while they've been developing higher petals, is reaching its full summation and completion.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's happening way back there in the knowledge petals. You know, I think that's what we forget, that there's, just like in our own physical bodies, as the causal body perfects the form, the vehicle that it's working through, each incarnation, it attempts to produce better physical body. It seems so simple, so non-essential, but yet it ultimately must express in full perfection.
Exactly. So there are different phases to this development, and what we probably are more interested in is the phases that relate to the first initiation, which is when these are more or less coming into, should we say, adjusted relation with each other. And that's, of course, around the time when we, after we have reoriented our values to become less material and more spiritual. Now, that's the time when we are able to take the first initiation. And then these are also becoming adjusted with respect to each other. So the form nature is no longer seen or used in the same way as it was early in the day of our development. It becomes a pure tool and instrument of service for us. So that's a new phase in the development. And that when we come into that mode of approach, there is happening something in the relationship between these petals in their cooperative work together. Yeah, so here we have the knowledge tier, the love tier, the sacrifice tier, and the synthesis tier. And here you have just another picture of the same thing. Maybe the colors are a bit more clear here, at least. Now, I would like to take something then from astrology which is required in order to really get to grips with this astrology of the egoic lotus. And this is from Esoteric Astrology, page 464, where it says that in the new astrology, which will be that of the soul, the paramount consideration of the 12 houses, which are now of such importance, will be less emphasized, and the consideration of the 3 crosses will emerge in their place. Okay, so what are the 3 crosses? Well, if we go back to this picture, we would say that the 3 crosses are composed of, first of all, the cardinal cross, these 2 signs, and these 2 signs. So Aries, Libra, Capricorn, and Cancer. Those are the 4 signs composing the cardinal cross. Then we have the fixed cross, Taurus, Scorpio, Aquarius, Leo. And then we have the mutable cross, Gemini, Sagittarius, Pisces, Virgo. If you're observant enough when we look at the crosses like this, you will see that here is found the same color for all the four arms on the same cross. And that is one of the keys in studying this. These three crosses, and I'm continuing on the same page in Esoteric Astrology, these three crosses make together 12 arms. And it is the energy flowing through the 12 arms and their place in the soul horoscope, which will assume the major importance, and this I will enlarge upon when we take up the theme of the three crosses. So, the three crosses make together 12 arms. So this tells us that the synthesis is really in the 3 and not in the 12, so to speak. Let's continue here. The 12 houses concern the personality. The 4 arms of the 3 crosses concern the soul, and it is these 12 and their appearance in the horoscope or their failure to appear which will govern the horoscope of the soul. So when he's talking about the horoscope of the soul, he may as well be talking about the astrology of the egoic lotus. Because there is something about the astrology of the egoic lotus which is reflective of the horoscope of the soul. Because the egoic lotus is, as we've understood, the monadic heart center. It is the house of the soul, if you will, on the mental plane. All the 4 influences of the 3 crosses will be found present in the chart of a master. So for a master, well, he has taken the 5th initiation and hence have left the causal body behind, and hence all the different petals have been awakened and put to the fires, so to speak. So necessarily, all the 4 influences of the 3 crosses will be found present in the chart of the master. But at that time, you would not be really studying the egoic lotus, because or the causal body, because there is no such thing any longer, at least as we have been told in the teachings. There may be something higher up with respect to the spiritual triad, but we haven't really been enlightened as to what that may be. The place of the 3 crosses in the life of the soul. Well, this will eventually supersede the houses in the horoscope, and the 12 arms of the 3 crosses will take the place of the 12 houses when casting the horoscope of the soul. So this is a statement pretty much like the previous one. This is from page 480 of Esoteric Astrology. And then we have from page 513 to 514 the statement that the horoscope is built up around the rising sign with the esoteric planets ruling. And these will convey the destiny of the disciple. And as I told you, the disciple will later be responding to the influences of the 12 arms of the 3 crosses as they pour their influences through the esoteric planetary rulers via the 12 houses. Okay, so he's saying this in at least 3 different places. So when things come in 3s, they are probably true, right? There is some truth to it. And of course, the number 3 in itself is the key number that is built into the whole structure of the egoic lotus. with its 3 tiers and 3 petals belonging to every tier. Now, what we started with a question on here before concerns the phases of petal development. And we know that the number 3 is central to the organizing of the whole lotus. Hence, we should also consider the 3 phases of petal development. So I'd like to look at these phases as being threefold as well. So there's first of all the phase of beginning or opening. And that can be very early in the day, back in Lemuria, for those of us who were enjoying those times. There is then also the second phase, which we could call the phase of unfoldment, which is more fully the coming to maturation rather than not just beginning or opening. And then the third phase, which we could call a rhythmic adjustment phase, which would be more than relating to the initiatory, cooperative relationship of the different tiers. So these 3 phases concern what we could call the differential reorientation of the wheel, because we're told that we are reorienting our wheel before we enter upon the fixed cross, upon which cross we develop the consciousness aspect and we focus on the soul. But before we take a step onto that cross in consciousness, we have to reorient ourselves. We have to reorient our values from material values to spiritual values. We have to reorient the energy trends within our own etheric vehicles and our different bodies so that they are, again, lifted up and not staying in the lower centers only. So that's the praise of the reorientation that we all have to go through. And that is somehow differential. And you can come a long way with respect to the physical etheric vehicle in terms of its reorientation, but not have fully gone through that when it comes to the astral mental vehicle. That then comes after, and then after a while, when we perhaps take the third initiation, we are fully transfigured, then only do we become fully reoriented, and thus have gone through all 3 phases with respect to all the tiers of petals. And here we have a few other words about that. For example, here in the stage of adjustment or rhythmic adjustment, the forces of the unfolding petals are then coordinated, becoming interactive, and displaying simultaneous and synchronistic action. And their interplay is completed and the circulation of the force currents perfected. And here I have gathered from the teachings, as I understand, the different petals to be connected to the stages of initiation. So prior to the first initiation, we would have an emphasis on the 6th petal, the 5th petal, and the 4th petal in the different phases of development, as I mentioned before here. And then for the first initiation, there would be likewise an emphasis on the 7th, the 6th, and the 5th petals. Prior to the second, we would have an emphasis on the 8th, 7th, and 6th petals, like this, all in their own phases of unfoldment, right? And for the second initiation as well, in this case, the 7th, 8th, and 9th petal. And then prior to the third initiation, we would have the synthesizing petals, the 10th and the 11th, very much awakened, so to speak. the 9th as well, and the 8th. And then at the 3rd initiation, we will have the central tier of synthesis petals being adjusted and coordinated. The 9th is perfected. And then, of course, at the 4th initiation, which is the renunciation or crucifixion, we have the 3 synthesis petals unfolded and coordinated with perfection, and then respond to the intense stimulation coming through here. And looking at a horoscope, we would then have to use the different planets to try to see what are the petals being emphasized by the soul in this incarnation. And the sun, which is a major factor, would of course be giving the emphasis and the focus to a large extent. Vulcan, in its own way, giving in a lower way the beginning of things. Mercury is good at linking the petals up. Venus, which is close to perfection in itself, would be indicating a phase 3 development of petals in the perfecting. And Mars would be activating where it is found. Jupiter would bring fulfillment or opening into fullness. Saturn would help to organize them. Chiron, adjustment. Uranus is the great awakener, is also the synthesizing planet, as is Neptune. Pluto helps with the setting free of things. So, if you then, in brief, look at a horoscope, well, this would probably be the horoscope of, I think it's FCD, actually. Yes, it's Roberta Assagioli. Yeah. So you would then be working with, I will just state a principle, it'll take 1 minute, if that's okay. You would then be working with, if we look to the sun, which is the focal point of emphasis to a large extent, we find that it is found in the, counting from the rising sign, it's found in the 9th arm, but it's close to conjunct to the 10th house. So that would then connect it to the 9th petal and the 10th petal. But it would also connect it to the 12th petal because it's in the 12th sign of the zodiac, Pisces. So he would be working very much with a focus on those petals, but not only so, because using the charts of the crosses, he could have had his sun in Cancer, down below here, because using the charts of the crosses, you are able to bridge these apparent separations between the signs, but they're only separations apparent. And in the astrology of the egoic lotus, you can always, even if you had a sun down here at the 4th house cusp, see it as part of the 10th, because that is the way that the synthesis of the charts of the crosses are working for us. So the sun could equally be found with respect to the, if it was down here, with respect to the 10th petal, as with the 1st or the 7th. And that's where the intuition comes in. And you cannot do that kind of astrology without using the intuition and the best knowledge that you have of the development of the consciousness of the individual. That's where you have to gauge which of the arms of the cross that the planet indicating a particular development has to find its location. So that's in essence what the astrology of the egoic lotus is about. And that's in 45 minutes or something like that.
And very good, Niklas. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.